This position. This doesn't look comfortable, right? So, for the shoulder, first and most important will always be having the pillow. If the pillow isn't big enough, you have an extra one. Creates a nice little nook. I sometimes actually like this because my ear isn't plugged. So be open to using the face cradle. At the very least, hey, this is nice and flat, less rolly. So I can use that coupled with the pillow. Wow. If the shoulder joint is more of a problem, that abdominal pillow that was already here can just stay there. They have to scoot down. Remember to scoot them down. So the pillow started here, they scoot down. If we leave the pillow there, then ideally, this is going smoothly, we create a pocket for the shoulder joint. And that was pretty much one of the bigger challenges I had with this stuff, is having somebody that had a bad arthritic shoulder and we were limited in size. And depending on the circumstance, you know, sometimes you just have to adapt out, and it's no sideline. And there's no point, in my opinion, of doing just one side. I don't want them that crooked, so then I have to shift gears into a prone, supine kind of routine. But even with this, one client that I've mentioned a few times, it was a case where had finally had some amazing success with a really arthritic shoulder. And that's the one where it was a couple of sessions worth of just oscillating it as much as possible throughout the session. And the rhythmic oscillation calmed things down, where I could just do a little bit of gentle massage. That was basically the intervention for more than a month. After we got everything settled down enough, then we could start bringing out some of the actual fix-it stuff. And the shoulder didn't get better. She did not get it replaced. We got it pretty much asymptomatic, even though the range was severely limited. But it just stayed with, if we kept up on this therapy and she did her movement stuff at home, then she could do all of, she collected turkeys, various types of chickens and turkeys. So
Real ones or like
yeah, I just like to have a collection. I want this kind of chicken and rooster, and I want this kind of turkey. And look how cool these eggs are. And these are clients you end up with for years. This is probably somebody I saw for 7 years. You know, it's a heck of a journey. So your clients really become your teachers. And that's where I say, like, the verbal interface of being like, hey, I'm just a beginner. I was told that shaking your shoulder until I'm sick of doing it might help you. What do you think about that? But we set up like this. And for her, I would make sure the arthritic shoulder was the one that was down first. We would do just the shoulder girdle neck stuff, then flip back over, then work on the symptomatic shoulder. That way I could at least get some of this deep release stuff done to balance her out, but I just limited how long I was in sideline. This also ended up being a person that was dual knee replacement, so that was a good lesson on top of it. So this position, and you could have some bolsters here, but where you really need something like this, you need the big square one to get a person nice and symmetrical for both reasons. For getting the spine as neutral as possible. Not only is it safer, it makes your ability just to find this stuff more consistently so much easier. If a person's laying there really crooked, you're gonna feel less comfortable as you're trying to even just find stuff and get pressure on it, right? So get this stuff out of the way. Here, myriad of assessments I can do that also just turn into something that feels nice. That whole rock and roll and move the shoulder. My contact points can be focused. I can be just hugging the ball and socket joint and kind of just rolling the humerus around and assessing and feeling how that's doing. Or I can drop down and be thinking more of the scapula. So my hand here is coming right down onto the, I had the shoulder joint, that inferior aspect, and then I'm kind of just using that to push and roll it around. So that can be an assessment, that can be an intervention, but now we're coming into at least a important location. I'll flip this thing over so you can see it better. For at least two of these primary releases. Most importantly, suboccipitals. So there's the positioning there, essential. Pelvic girdle, same thing. Prone, I can kind of interface with the SI joint. Prone will be best for the deep lateral hip rotators. So I showed some of that, squashing the glutes and moving the hip around. You can get to that stuff in this position, but I find it a bit more awkward to get my pressure focused where I want it to, because everything's kind of on tension when they flex their hip like this. You can do it. It can work just fine, like anything you practice it enough. But I can't get as much joint movement incorporated. But for this right here, you can't do better. And even for the SI joint, there's some points in contact here that I feel ergonomically are so much better for you than doing it in prone. So let me flip this character over real quick. And if I had a human spatula, smooth. Okay. Related to the skeleton, let's just look at the placement of our body. I'm going to mostly show using my forearm, but know you could adapt and use other parts of your body for application. The suboccipitals. So we have to distinguish the occipitals from the suboccipitals. Like, don't get caught in a testing world where you're confused. The occipitals are on the occipital bone. They're right there. And then they connect to, and I've learned it in other anatomy classes as occipitofrontalis. And their scalp is one shared tendon. So they're literally the antagonists to each other. Frowny face, surprise face, and then your scalp's going along for a ride back and forth. So occipitals versus suboccipitals. The suboccipitals are very deep. They are underneath, at the very least, upper trapezius, levator scapula, and then like those extra neck extensor muscles. So you have your regular rector spinae muscles, ilex spaghetti, iliocostalis, longissimus, and spinalis. But then the neck has a few extra ones, usually splenus something. Splenus capitis, splenus cervicis, but splenus something. So they're deep. Base of the skull. Connect down to the first few vertebrae, right? Now, as far as the skeleton is concerned, I think of atlas axis, C1, C2, as correlating with the SI joint. So I think of the suboccipitals as related to SI joint stuff. And if I'm trying to think of, you have one or both of these things, is it maybe worthwhile to interface with both and see if that gets a bigger effect? Now, you may feel it more in your SI joint, but maybe I'll see that we get something more profound to happen by also working on this paired area. Top of the spine, bottom of the spine, how? Craniosacral therapy focuses on these areas, but it's much more gentle than doing this kind of compression. Here, what I really want to reinforce is just how deep you ultimately have to be. So if you're gonna do this, there is no way, even if there's nothing actually wrong with this is not gonna be intense. It has an intense sensation. You need to just verbalize that with the client, that when we come in, I'm like, all right, we're gonna get these muscles deep in the neck. Sensation can be intense, but you tell me when the pressure is just perfect. That always gets set. And then I usually hold the scapula so I have some awareness where the rest of the body is. Again, pillow and everything, perfect. And then I come in, and I'll use everything from grazing up upper trap and letting that guide me to the base of the skull. Trying to make something feel nice while I'm doing that too. So I'll start here, but I'm not really trying to do a whole lot of force. I'm just trying to make it pretty, of grazing up. Start here, make contact with upper trap, but I'm not trying to push and do something there. I'm just trying to go, let's have a swoop, and then I bump. I don't do it like that, but I come in nice and gentle, I find the base of the skull, and then I start subtly adjusting, usually my elbow angle, to get more precisely on this part of the suboccipitals. So think more really medial to the spine, or I start tracking further out laterally. And these are so tightly packed in there, I can't ever distinguish specifically which one I'm on. But I know that I'm either right in line with the midline of the skull and the spine, or I'm going out more lateral. And it can be a collection of a few things, but usually what I'm looking for is the one that jumps out to them. I'll try to say to them, hey, we're gonna apply some compression here. It can be quite intense, but you let me know if we find something that really feels like it's helpful. And then at any time, I'm always gonna have a conversation related to pressure being not too much, not too little, just right. So in order to be more medial, I need to just bend my elbow more so that my ulna, essentially, is making more contact right there with the posterior side. And then from there, I just flatten out and let my elbow go from flexion to a little bit more extension, and that will take me right over into the lateral part of these suboccipitals. And the whole time we're pushing that deep, we're also compressing the attachment sites for upper trap and the later scap and all that. So the point is, we find something that assesses as short, and then when we compress it, has a sensation that feels essential. And then it'll jump out. If you haven't had that neck compression, I'll be like, oh wow, that's it. That's the thing. Please don't move. I'll sometimes see checkerboards and all kinds of stuff related to the suboccipital releases. Like, it's a very, very intense and unique kind of sensation that'll create kind of eye sensation stuff. And in the trigger point thing, this is your common tension headache thing. But you gotta be thorough and start more posterior, more medial, and track more lateral. On the far side of that, and as you get closer to the jaw, and the actual lateral side of the spine, and certainly anything anterior, get your caution lights on. Be very careful, okay? So right there, that big bony knob. Anybody remember what that is? You'll be fine. The mastoid process. You can find it. Go behind your ear. Go right behind your ear. There's a big bony knob right there. Can't miss it. And that's the mastoid process. And right there's the ear. So the sternocleidomastoid goes from that to here, your sternoclavicular joint. Okay, now it's a big muscle. It's big and it is strong. It's holding the, and it works together. Both sides work together when you flex forward, or if you're lifting your head out of gravity, like you're laying down and you're lifting your head up. Both of these have to work synergistically to do that. So for posture and all this kind of stuff, they have to work together. But as soon as I start rotating, oh no, now they're antagonistic. Now one side shortens while the other side is supposed to lengthen. If we have something related to eye strain or odd head positioning during a work activity, my violin player and my dental hygienist helped me with this one. So the violin player was really helpful. It's like, yep, clear asymmetry. You're not going to change that, so we got to give you a sternocleidomastoid release almost every week, and I'm sorry. So, now, we can get some of sternocleidomastoid at the far lateral aspect of even while we're working on suboccipitals. But it's going to be only one small part of it, because you can see that, yes, it attaches up here, and it's bulkier up here. The meat of the muscle is higher up behind the jaw, up to the ear, and then it thins out and actually kind of splits into two down here. So if you're going to focus your attention, it's going to be up here. And I can get some of it right here in sideline using a forearm. And it smoothly just transitions from going all this good neck massage stuff to come in. So I've warmed everything up. Everything starts like this. Massage, massage, massage. Remember that the temples are really important. The frontalis is important. The actual occipitals are important. But you see my hand placements be like this. Forehead, back of the skull. Occipitofrontalis. The temples, you can't mash on temples enough. TMJ, headache stuff, I promise you, you should look at the temples and then, well, we don't have time for everything, but here, all jaw movements, everything can be amazing. Not going after masseter. I wait on masseter. I look at temples first. But a really good head squish and a really good general neck and shoulder, everything, roll it around, warm everything up, and then we come in, glide that forearm up to the base of the skull, flex my elbow more so I'm more posterior, and say, okay, we're gonna start applying some pressure. Let me know when the pressure's just right. Sink in, they go, oh, that's good. All right, a little bit less, a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. Okay, I dial it back, and then I maybe shift my orientation, and I go, okay, I'm gonna pick an initial thing to do the eye movements. Roll their eyes around in a circle. It's a really easy thing to initially do here. Can't go wrong. Eye position related to head position is a thing. So here I go, okay, keep your eyes closed, big circles, roll to one direction. I wait for a little bit, I roll your eyes in the other direction, and then I'll slowly flatten my forearm out, and I'll say, okay, you tell me which one of those feels like it's more part of the problem. This or that. And I've covered both those spaces, and the one that creates more of the symptom, that'll become more of the focus. As I flatten out, I will be hitting some of that sternocleidomastoid. So this is where you could start incorporating some head movement, but all the coaching, you should do this with any active movement in general, is tell a person our goal is for the movement to be slow and coordinated, and the amount of effort is maybe only like 10 to 30%. Like we want these to be small activations and very slow, tiny movements. So if I'm applying compression anywhere here, initially I can use eye movements, but the other piece would be having them shift their head, either tiny circles, one way and the other. That kind of gets everything. That's your initial go-to. If you can roll something in a circle, hey, that's activating and deactivating everything. But then you can get more precise. You can say, hey, go ahead and just move your head a little bit back and forth. Find a position that what I'm pushing on, it makes it feel better. Makes it feel as comfortable as possible. Usually it's going to be them crunching up into you. So I'm pushing here. They're usually going to shorten what you're pushing on. They hold it for how long? 10 seconds. Relax. Now push into the pillow a little bit. Go the opposite way. That's how I could get more specific with like the muscle energy technique side of things. But the real trick is getting comfortable with that forearm and being able to find your starting point. I'm trying to find that nook if I can. and then flatten out. And that's suboccipitals. With headache stuff, God, you will save a person's, not life, but it's an area for me symptomatically that's essential. If I don't get this done, I don't feel like I've gotten a massage. So, now, the corollary to that would be SI joint stuff. So even just the muscles, or something's not connected. There's so many things that are connected up and down the spine related to posture and movement. And even during movement, an important thing to remember is that the spine isn't trying to be the main mover. Like all the muscles here are mostly holding the spine as stable as it usually can, and secondary movements occur as the shoulders and your hips and pelvis move. So my cervical spine does have to allow for movement as I do a really, but I'm not walking doing this. My neck my head is staying stationary looking forward as my rest of my body pivots around me. Same thing ideally with the low back. Lumbar spine, relatively stable while the pelvis and the hips, think you're like amazing runway walkers, Everything's moving, the low back and everything is nice and stable and upright and perfect, right? So that's where here, especially, in our tech-centered kind of world, this is such a common thing, and it always has been. So always look there. And then as we travel down, this area ends up being the next space. So the elements that make this tough are navigating, finding parts of the skeleton to be right next to, but not pushing too much on. You don't want to be coming here and then applying pressure right into the skull. You find the skull and then adjust your pressure so that you're between it and the spine. Down here, that ends up being the most annoying part for people is that the bony structure is here. That little nook is even smaller and tougher to find. So that'll be the next one we talk about, as well as coming over and thinking about quadratus lumborum. Scalenes, I didn't touch on here just because the way I'm gonna show you guys to palpate those is gonna be supine. If you get practiced and comfortable enough, and I would maybe suggest some continuing education specific to them, there are ways to interface with the scalenes with a forearm in this position, but you have need to have your palpation sensitivity trained here. And that usually just takes a little while for you to be able to start feeling with your forearms like they're your hands. It will come, but that's not going to be something that you're going to be comfortable with to start. So I do scalene releases with my forearm here. But I suggest starting out, you palpate them with your digits in supine.